Yeah, no. So it's that sounds like a really fun trip, by the way.
Yeah, I really am pumped about it. Really am pumped about it. And then I'm going to this big never been. There's a conference. It's Arizona State GSV Global. What is GSV? Something Ventures. Anyway, it's like a gigantic educational futurist conference. I guess
Whoa.
is the best way of putting it. Yeah, really cool. I've never been. It's always been something I've wanted to do. It's in San Diego, and it's like a 10,000 plus person conference. It's I've never been to a conference of that size, so I'm super excited. So that's what I got left for travel in theory for this academic year.
That's in San Diego. What's it called? It's the future of.
So it's called ASU as an Arizona State University, ASU GSV. GSV is Global Silicon Global Silicon Valley, which is a venture, I believe it's a venture capital group looking specifically in the education space. Um, Very cool, very cool.
Whoa, I want to know about that because maybe we'll go.
Yeah, it's
So,
really neat. I've never been. Always wanted to go. Gigantic. Yeah. So
oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Yeah, and we're just gonna let some people hop in here as they come in. Let me just make sure that we are good on Instagram. We should be good on Instagram. Let me just confirm. All right, let's do this. So, welcome everybody. Welcome back. Another week. Last week was fun. We had Dr. Fumiko Haift and Caroline Richter on. So I'm excited to have you on now, Josh. So if you are tuning in here, welcome. My name is Jake Sussman. I am the founder of Superpower Mentors. We are a neurodiverse mentorship platform connecting kids and teens with learning differences to a mentor anywhere in the world. Now, I've been hopping on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, interviewing some of the coolest minds in the neurodiverse space. These are people that are disruptors, innovators, inventors, and thought leaders. And tonight I have an individual that I have admired for many years. And Josh Clark is the head of school of the Landmark School. Welcome, Josh.
hi, thanks for having me. Super excited.
Super pumped to have you on. And tonight, though, there's been this wave happening over the past, maybe like maybe year and a half, probably year, right, Josh? Like, I mean, it's unbelievable what we're seeing is, this wave of the evolution of AI and this conversation starting to come about in the world of education, which is a field that hasn't really changed in over 100 years, really, right? So there's a lot of discussion. So Josh, I'm really excited to have you on because, we're going to be talking a lot about, first of all, your story with Landmark and you as a leader in the space. But more importantly, I'm curious about how some of your thoughts on the future of education, where we're going.
Awesome,
Right?
awesome. I'm glad to dig in.
Yep. And also for those of you tuning in, please comment where you are watching from. There's nothing better than community here. So go ahead and do that and feel free to ask any questions you want because I'll be able to answer them with Josh here. So Josh, tell me, so you're the head of school of Landmark. Tell me about what you do, like the school. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Yeah. So Landmark School, we are just north of Boston, Massachusetts. In a town called Beverly, so kind of in between Manchester by the Sea and Salem, right there on the North Shore of Boston. I am now about a year and a half into my tenure at Landmark. So I originally from the South, so I even today, so it was 37 degrees today at the end of March, and I'm still adjusting to what that means and what that looks like. But Landmark is a 2nd through 12th grade independent school for students with dyslexia and related language-based learning differences. We are in our 52nd year of operation, right?
Oh my gosh!
No, one of not the, but one of the oldest LD schools, certainly in the world. Again, serving 2nd through 12th grade students, day and boarding in our high school program. We have boarding students from the Northeast, from all over the country, really from all over the world, which is super cool to kind of see this kind of mixture of students that have so many things that are different about them, and yet this one universal thing that they share in common, which is how they learn. So Landmark School's been a leader in this space for a really long time. In addition to the school, we also have an outreach program where we work with about 50 or 60 different districts just in the state of Massachusetts alone, trying to build language-based programs in public schools, and then do some consulting with private schools and teacher training and all kinds of cool stuff.
And you're not just the head of school of Landmark, you do other things as well in the space, right?
Sure. Yeah. So I have the honor of serving as the chair of the board for the International Dyslexia Association, or IDA. So a lot of work, a lot of time in there, which I really enjoy. And then I'm also really involved with a group called Made by Dyslexia, which is a global non-for-profit, with a stated mission to change the world's perception of dyslexia from a disability into a valued difference.
Wow. So you are not sitting still. We're making strides over here. So let's just kind of shift into this conversation now of like, what is this conversation around AI and education? Like, what is this all about? Tell me, please.
Yeah, I'm obsessed.
Let's go. I know you are.
So I mean, I think there's a couple things to think about. One of the things that I'm a question that I keep going back to over and over and over again. And to your point, right? We're probably a year and a half. I think ChatGPT 3.5.
A year and a half. Yeah.
Like November 2022, right? So so anyway, it's really in the grand scheme of things, right? Like we're 18 months into this conversation that's had just already this really disruptive effect. And what will that mean moving forward, right? And so for me, the central question I come back to again and again is we now live in a world where the things that our kids being our dyslexic kids, you, me, right? My literal kids, we live in a world where our kids, the things that they struggle with, the rest of the world just got effortlessly better at it, right? The rest of the world just got effortlessly better at reading, writing, and spelling. And so among many things for me, what does that mean for our dyslexic kids, right? So that's something I'm super interested in. I'm also super interested in this opportunity that, and we can get more into this, but AI is going to have a disruptive impact, I think, on all industries. Right? We could, again, dive into that more, what that looks like in timeline. But I really think that all industries are going to see serious implications as a result of AI, including education. And so one of the things I really want to make sure is that as we start to think about what could be some really revolutionary change in education, we're talking about LD kids. Because what I want to make sure that we don't do is kind of, disrupt a model to only continue to leave out 20% plus of the population, because we're not building it with them in mind as we start to construct an AI-infused approach to education.
Well, I love that you're saying that, because growing up as someone with a learning difference, right, where my entire relationship with learning was pain, right? Like I had all this trauma in school, and I always got writer's block, and I always started to question myself and always felt alone. Like as someone with a learning difference, with math, for example, I couldn't move forward without asking for help. I needed to know that answer. I froze. So there really is a lot of room for this creative thought. Also, do you think that this, with ChatGPT and being able to have it write essays and write anything you want, can that be a challenge in the creative process, or could it be a help?
Yeah. So I think it really can be either, depending on how you use it, right? And I think it is only a hindrance when we are trying to bypass or to fully substitute what would be still an essential skills or essential production of something. And at the end of the day, a lot of the fears around ChatGPT, like it's going to create cheating, it's going to create all these things, et cetera, et cetera. It's the standards of what we expect of our students and what we expect from each other in terms of production should start to raise, right? What ChatGPT can create should be the bottom rung of what we expect and anticipate, right? So if students are thinking, or our fears are, they're just going to use this to create the essay so they don't have to do it themselves, our expectations of what an essay should be and what it should look like and what a student should produce is going to change, where that expectation will become minimal, right? So I think we'll have a learning curve and kind of an adaptation where there's this period of we're trying to understand, but we now live in an age where everyone can write a good essay. If you're in college and you're turning in a crap essay, I would argue that's a problem unto itself when you have a tool such as ChatGPT and other forms of AI that can really partner with you to do some really amazing stuff. And I think we have to explicitly teach kids about this. We have to have conversations. We have to show them the difference between AI doing it for you and AI augmenting what you are yourself able to do. And I think that's an important distinction.
I love that, because, having conversations is everything. That's where it begins. And what I am fearing, and a lot of the parents that are in our program, but a lot of the parents that perhaps are watching this right now, you could be a teacher having the conversation, right, in the classroom, and also you could be the parent having the conversation. Right now, today, we may have to only control as a parent having that conversation first. If I'm seeing my kid on using ChatGPT, right, for the essays, what could be a good way to approach that conversation with my child, or perhaps even with my student? Yeah,
sure. So I think we have to remember too that ChatGPT to use it requires incredible language skills, right? It obviously is not intuitive. It can't read your mind. It doesn't know what you're asking it to produce unless you yourself, right, through prompting, through explanation, and I would even argue through conversing with it, is the only way for it to kind of understand and be able to create what you want. So I think, again, I think we have to remember that just to use the tool requires an amount of language competency, an amount of basic writing skills, and all these other things, right? So the idea that it's a complete bypass, I think, is a misunderstanding to begin with. Secondly, I think we have to also keep in mind that where ChatGPT can be a tool is many of us, as an example, right? So we might be in situations where we have the privilege of we have an outside writing tutor, right? And I'm not dyslexic. I'm at a traditional public or private school, and I have the good fortune of my parents being able to help me have an outside writing tutor. So when I turn in my final essay for my grade, I've had someone be working with me, reviewing it, right? And none of that's cheating. All of that is allowed and acceptable, but it's also this huge discrepancy between who can access it and who cannot. So a great way to think about ChatGPT is that free 24-hour accessible writing tutor. Here's what I've come up with. Can you help me understand or highlight for me areas where I'm not supporting my thesis? Or can you look at this and help make sure that I have consistent voice? Or whatever the case may be. If you just ask ChatGPT to write the essay, and to be honest, and you and I both be dyslexic, and you're dyslexic, your teacher's going to know, because when you go from here to here in terms of producing something, they're going to say, what's going on here? But instead, it can partner with you to figure out how can you better articulate your ideas, and then how can you check your own work, which again is something that we encourage kids to do, and in fact, kids of privilege get to do, right, so often through private tutoring and other mechanisms, that this just kind of equals the playing field.
Wow. And as a leader of a school, how are you guiding a leading institution into the world of AI?
Yeah, so we're taking it step by step. So I'm more evangelical about it, right? Than I would say we as a full institution are, because it's still new, right? We're lots of steps here to go through. So I think one of the things that I'm really encouraging is we have conversations about this, right? I think banning it is a fool's errand at this point, right? Because it's everywhere, it's ubiquitous, it's undetectable. This idea that we're gonna, you're gonna be able to feed it into turnitin.com or whatnot, and it's gonna be able to identify what's AI and what's not. That's all garbage. Every study shows that it's not it's not realistic to think that we're able to just ban it or identify it, right? So that's step one. We have to have conversations with our kids about it, and then I think we need to have conversations with kids about what's acceptable use and what is cheating, right? Because there's a difference, right? What is an example of this being used and when's it not? How do we have conversations about, let me ask my teacher about how I might use it for this particular assignment. Does that fall within the guidelines, et cetera, right? So that, I think that's a big piece of it. And then also as a school, we're also talking as teachers, how can we use it? One of the things that really excites me from an instructional standpoint is we're talking about kids who often have a comprehension and intellectual ability here, but their ability to decode words is here, right? And that's a constant struggle. When you have a 10th grader, right, who could comprehend on a college level, but is reading at a 7th grade level, it's really, really hard to get written text in front of that kid that's appropriate for them. Well, AI allows us to turn a dial where we can turn down the complexities of the linguistical requirements that it would take a kid to navigate reading it, but without compromising, if not turning up, the content itself. So from an instructional standpoint, it's this amazing equalizer, right? Where again, we're not substituting instruction, we're not diminishing instruction, we're actually enhancing it.
Well, I think that starts to open up this conversation because I'm seeing a lot of talk on social media around what is a teacher, right? Like, is the difference between as a teacher, like what's their role? Are they a guide? Are they someone that holds all the knowledge that delivers it? How are we going to then change the way that we're teaching information, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting because the technology is going to accelerate so much faster than we can, right? So I think it'll be an evolution over time, and there's always going to be a role for a teacher, always. But what I'd like to believe is going to happen is a couple of things. One is that we're going to be able to focus teachers' time and energy about the things that made them want to become a teacher in the first place. And that's not paperwork. That's not filling out forms. That's not spending hours trying to find content that's appropriate for a kid. In schools like Landmark, we're even though we have a tight profile and we have kids that have been accepted for a very specific purpose, there's still a great deal of differentiation that has to happen, right? Because if you've been at Landmark for 1 year versus a kid that's been at Landmark for 6 years, how do we make sure that we can differentiate the content that we're presenting? AI is going to help with that. Think in a public school classroom, we got 30 kids, different languages, different diagnosed and undiagnosed learning differences, so on and so forth. Imagine what we're going to be able to do to differentiate on such a high level. So I think that is an incredibly important piece of this. And then I'd also like to think that there are so many kids. In fact, the vast majority of dyslexic kids are never going to get to a Landmark or a school like Landmark. Vast majority of dyslexic kids are never going to have a Superpower mentor, right? No matter what, even despite all of our best efforts, we just know that the reality is that the vast majority of dyslexic kids are never even diagnosed as dyslexic. So can we use AI to help build instruction that is responsive, that is based in the science of reading, that can provide to kids in middle of nowhere Iowa that doesn't have access to a tutor or a independent school? Can we democratize this education and this approach so it's not just for a rarefied few? And we're also not relying on super smart, super great teachers who don't have the time or the resources to become retrained, right? To spend all this time trying to figure out, I learned it in college this way, but it turns out that's wrong. Is there a way that technology can help expedite that conversion?
And do you see that happening soon?
Such a good question. I mean, that's the kind of the thing I'm still navigating through all this. I think there's some really cool things out there. I've started to see some AIs where you can go in and if you follow a certain scope and sequence, so if you use certain curriculum that's grounded in the science of reading, you could go in and help, and AI can actually generate word lists for you, and they can generate lessons and all these other things based on kind of the very specific rules and sequences of your what you're trying to do. That's pretty amazing. I think we're farther out from AI being responsive enough that a kid's sitting there, it's giving it instruction, and it's responding to the kid's errors and understanding, I need to spend more time here or more time there. I think that's going to take a little while. But I think we can dramatically improve instruction and dramatically improve differentiation now. It's just a matter of kind of focus and time. The idea of AI really being the primary driver of instruction in general, like that personalized learning, I think we're going to get there, but I think that's more of the 5 to 10 to 15 year trajectory.
Wow. Well, I guess that kind of leads to my next question is for our parents and teachers watching, do you know any AI tools that are assisting dyslexic and ADHD students today? Like, what are some good tools out there?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. One is I think as much as I'm an evangelical about this, and I'm so excited, I also it's so new that anybody that tells any program or any tool that says, "Oh, we've got this figured out," or "We can do X, Y, or Z," I'm super cautious of, only because it's still so early in this. So I think and then also obviously with the caveat of age, right? What we want to do with a 8-year-old in terms of AI versus an 18-year-old are very different things,
So
right? But with that said, I think thinking about specifically for writing, using AI as a writing coach, right? Having your child take their writing assignment, being a paragraph, being an essay, whatever it is, and then helping them understand you're not going to put it into AI and say, fix this. You're going to ask it a question about what it is you're trying to improve with your writing, right? Can you give me some examples where I do a good job using evidence to support my claims? Can you also show anywhere where you feel like I could improve that? And within seconds, right? It's doing it for you. But if you don't know as a writer, and if you don't know as a student, gosh, I need to make sure I have strong evidence, and I know that's a place where I'm not doing a great job, then AI is not going to be near as powerful as a tool. So that's why I think it's so important that it's not a bypass, it's an augmentation.
Right, absolutely. And I wanted to talk about this because Jessica brought something up that's interesting that I wanted to also ask you. She was saying that that she thinks that it would be hard to know what you need to do differently without further training. Teacher training should still be paramount. I want to talk about teacher training, okay? Because there's going to be a whole demand on training teachers on how to use AI in the classroom. Are you seeing conversations or programs or people talking about teacher training tools and tricks and tips for
yeah. So a couple of things, and I think to Jessica's great point too. I think I think there's all kinds of how do we prepare teachers for an AI infused world? How do we also again not export or how do we also ensure that teachers have the basic knowledge that we would expect, right, in terms of instruction to begin with? So first, I think in terms of teacher instruction when it comes to AI, the number one things that we have to do is create time and create space for teachers to just play. Go in there and play, right? Figure things out. An example I use, I'm a big Swiftie, if you didn't know. I'm obsessed with Taylor Swift. One of the things that I love to show is I can go in. Let's pretend I'm teaching 6th grade science, and I'm introducing photosynthesis, right? And I'm noticing my kids aren't really into this. I can go in and I can say, either I can be, as a teacher, I can be very specific of here are my learning objectives, if I have them, or I can even be more broad and just say my topic is photosynthesis. I can get as specific or as broad as I want. But I say, okay, so what I want you to do? I want you to create a lesson for me or introduce the concept of photosynthesis, using Taylor Swift as the kind of the conduit for the connection. And then I can do the same thing. I say, now I want you to do that, and I want you to use the Boston Red Sox. Now I want you to do that, and I want you to use Pokemon. So now I can sit down with my kids, and I can introduce a concept in 3 different ways using 3 different entry points based on the kids' interests, background knowledge, right? We all learn based on what we already know. And when we're interested in something, we're much more motivated to understand and pursue it. Right. So I think for teachers, like that's a big point of it. And also Jessica's point about, teachers got to have training. And I agree. And what I also come back to is in the grand scheme of things, people's concerned about AI and what if it disrupts education to such a degree and damn near 70% of kids can't read in the U.S. right now, right? The proficiency levels in the vast majority of public schools throughout the U.S., dyslexic or not, are abysmal. It's terrifying. It's a crime. So I also, while I want to make sure that we preserve, I also want to recognize that for the vast majority of kids, we're not doing a great job.
It's
So
not working.
not working.
It's not working.
So that's my soapbox about that.
That's it. Thanks, Jessica. But yeah, I mean, it's not working.
Right.
Right?
We have the knowledge. We know what to do. It is the application of what.
I think people are just afraid of change, right? At the end of the day, when we get comfortable, which by the way, comfort is the demise of humanity, in my opinion, right? Because as soon as we get comfortable, we don't innovate, we don't change. And education, as you know, the model of it, with the exception of innovative schools like Landmark and Foreman's and Hamlin Robinson's, right? Like these are schools that are driving change in education, but for the most part, it's been the same format. Right. But now what we're saying is this is actually forcing a change in the conversation. Right.
Yeah. So as an example, there's a gentleman named Michael Horn, who's kind of an educational theorist. Does a lot of really cool writing and thinking around education, K-12 and higher ed. And one thing that he talks about is right now in our educational model, time is more important than learning. Right. Because you think about we're gonna wherever you are in the learning process or what you're trying to master, that is secondary to whether or not you're in third grade or fourth grade, whether or not it's the end of the period, whether or not we have the test scheduled for Friday, right? I mean, you could take a test, you could fail that test, and to what end? It doesn't really matter because time is, we're not working towards mastery, we're working to follow a time and a schedule. So I think that's again a thing that AI can have, because you got 30 kids, and if you can't differentiate, you got to keep everybody on the same, level. But if we can suddenly truly individualize the instruction for each student with the use of technology, then suddenly mastery can be our goal more so than marching, through.
I'll tell you, because you just hit the nail on the head and you just tapped into my biggest passion, which is time, right? Like, and understanding it, because, as someone with a learning difference, right? Time is not my best friend, right? So the one of the many things that we've not been taught in traditional schooling is how to navigate time, right? And because we're talking about everything comes down to time, right? Like my whole life up until at the end of high school, my 12th grade has been, what is it, like 8 a.m. till 3:30 p.m., right? That whole day, I wake up, do my thing, 8 a.m. till 3:30 p.m. Then I have like 5 hours until bed, and then that's it, right? All of a sudden, college comes, and that just got thrown away, right? So now, freshman year of college, first semester, I have executive functioning challenges. I was never told that I have to figure out what to do at 11 a.m. Right? Like that was never taught by me. Now, also going back to what's happening in the classroom, there's one person in the class that I have to ask a question. Now, I may, if I have an IEP, get someone else to ask a question, like my support teacher in the classroom. But at the end of the day, I'm just receiving information all day. I'm not giving it out and interacting with the information that I'm receiving in my desk. What you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, with this evolution, I, as a dyslexic student with executive functioning, sitting in a classroom, right, with 30 other kids, can interact with the content on my own, which teaches independence, right? But all of a sudden, when it hits 11 a.m. at freshman year of college, what am I going to do with that time? I think there's a way that AI can say, okay, so what is the best way for me to set up my schedule given my data over the past 5 years, 6 years, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. And to your point about time, it's super important too. Right now, schools are built. Let's take algebra as an example. Schools aren't really built and designed to teach you algebra. Schools are built and designed to determine whether or not you passed or failed algebra. Right. So the idea is not, I'm going to work with Jake. Jake needs 3 days on decimals. So we're going to spend a little bit. I don't even know if decimals are part of algebra. That's terrible. But
honestly, not.
You get the idea, right? We're going to spend 3 days on this with Jake, whereas Johnny only needs a day. So Johnny's got it. We're going to move on. But my goal is to make sure that Jake has this understanding. And then we're going to get to fractions. And maybe Jake only needs 2 days on that, but Johnny needs 4, and so on and so forth, right? Suddenly with AI, we're able to individualize instruction to ensure mastery. Right now, we're not interested in mastery. We're interested in more, did you pass or did you fail? And to what end do we? Because if you fail, it's not like we then make adjustments and understand, what did you not understand? Let's go back. But in the grand scheme, that's the kind of revolution I'd like to see AI be able to help us do, is to be able to tailor learning to what kids need in order to understand concepts. And your point also about that, I think we forget school is not real. There is nothing about school that is reflected in the real world.
No, it's not.
No.
By the way, harsh reality check, right? To every teacher I've ever had was that I don't remember what I learned my junior year of high school, the book I read. Now, it adds up, but it's about the much bigger picture. It's not about memorizing every word in the chapter and then quizzing me on it. How about give me a scenario and how you're going to apply that.
Right.
That's what I want. That's learning.
Right. And as you and I both know, that application piece aligns so much more with the way dyslexic kids, by and large, think and process the world.
I'll give you a really funny story. We had I had an NT a bunch of years ago. He was like 9 or 10. Hated reading, like passion hated, like did not want to do it. And but being a Swift, he loved Taylor Swift.
Of course you did.
So going off what you're saying, you got to find the interests. We printed out Taylor Swift lyrics, and he started reading it. Now, I'm not a reading teacher, right? But if we use our brains, doing the thing that they love will ignite the willingness to want to learn because it's comfortable and they know the lyrics. It helps.
Right.
I don't want to do it. Right. So I think we have to remove ourselves, and it's very hard. Again, it's easy for us to say because we're in the world of disrupting education, right? But when you're in public school and you're dealing with the curriculum and you have to follow a certain way, it's very hard to be creative.
Right. It is. And again, I think that's where AI is really, though, going to challenge how I think it's the value proposition that currently exists in schools, I think is going to be strongly challenged by AI, right? This idea of, I'm going to write, I'm going to judge you by your ability to write an essay, or we're going to spend all this time on these isolated skills that only exist in school. Meanwhile, I know that I could get a computer to just do this for me. How are we going? I think we're going to have to find ways in a very positive way to give kids more agency, to give kids more opportunity to demonstrate, not just, what do I know? How can I use what I know to solve a problem? And I think that's appropriate and exciting. And again, I think AI allows for that.
And Stacy was even talking about, while it's great for students, right, also for parents, right, in terms of trainings, which are things that we have to put together, right? Like it has to be put together, and it's not just for any type of student. I want to have training specifically for students with LD, right? It's important for that, also for the parents, because everyone needs to figure this out too at the same time.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things anybody can do is just play. Get on ChatGPT and just play. Ask it questions. Experiment. As adults, today I used it to generate a response to an email. I had an email that I was like, I don't know how to respond to this. I need to process and think through this.
Is that the one I got from you?
No, yeah. But so I put it. But so I'm constantly just looking for ways to use it because it helps me better understand it. And then it allows me to be able to have more conversations with students and then with my own kids about what am I learning, how much. Because I think the other thing to think about with AI is I think a lot about social media. And if we could go back in time to 2004 and really think about if we were to introduce social media in a way that was explicit, responsible, targeted, all the things that we now know, how different would it look, right? And instead what happened was you had kids and adults equally at the same time, experimenting with this without making connections, without having conversations, without thinking through the ramifications. And then here we are today in the situation that we're at. And I think often, kids get a bad rap with social media and people say, oh, it's social media has done this to kids and done. And I agree. And they learned it from you. I mean, you adults also are terrible at this, right? You adults feel power to say horrible and do terrible things. So I think we have to think about that in terms of AI as well. Again, not in terms of banning it, but thinking about me as an adult, how can I use it productively? How can I have conversations with that? When I use it and I'm uncomfortable, I'm like, gosh, I don't know if this is right or fair or equitable. Talk to your kid about that.
Right.
It's okay to have that conversation, because that's the other crazy and hard part about this is it's about training, but we're 18 months in. There is no training. Anybody that says I have the answers, either they're lying or they're going to be wrong in 24 hours because it's changing. So
I think we've become so obsessed with the answer that it's destroyed our ability to be curious.
Yeah.
Right? We're on a quest in our society to have answers. Right? To be diagnosed. I need to know. I have to. Or like there has to be the evidence-based, research-backed, all the things with all the credentials thing. That's the thing that's going to work. Right?
Yep.
I'll tell you, like, even a therapist from Harvard didn't reach me.
Yeah.
Like that's the point. Like right now, today, everything that we've known in our past of what we were taught is being thrown upside down.
Right.
Especially if you have a child with a learning difference who is neurodiverse, everything that you were ever taught as a parent has to be put upside down. Let's go back to our child selves of being creative and want to play. And the best way that we can parent and teach is to dive in, which, by the way, is the scariest thing, because that means you're putting yourself out there of an unknown territory that is foreign.
Right.
But if we want to be relevant, and if you want to have relationships with your kids, if you want to guide your kids and not be blind, we have to dive in. We have no choice.
Right. Well, and there's a really, I think it will become even more clear and present, this kind of urgency of a use case, in that separate from our kids, separate from trying to mentor and help them understand. I think we are seeing, and we will continue to see, and somewhat varied by industry in terms of rate of disruption, but our jobs, no matter what we do, is likely to change to different degrees of kind of urgency in the next 3 to 5, certainly 10 years, because of AI. This idea of what I do right now, and I will continue to do it the way I do it, and I can expect the same kind of results in terms of appreciation or productivity or whatever the case may be. All that's going to change. All that is going to change, and that's also the world that we are preparing our kids for. So if we're not thinking about how can I use AI to up my game in general in everything, we're going to find that what the expectations that we have been meeting are far outdated and do not get us the results that they did 3 to 5 years ago.
Right. And also, and I'd love for you to speak on this, but if you catch your kids using ChatGPT, that does not mean laziness.
No.
That is the worst thing. We don't want to equate utilizing these services or these not services, but these resources and tools as laziness, right? Because it's actually innovation, right? It's working smarter, not harder, and we are the masters at that,
right?
But it does warrant a conversation, right?
Yeah. You got to have I think it's beyond appropriate. I think it's essential that we have conversations. How are you using it? What are you doing it for, right? What problem are you trying to solve by doing this, right? All these different things are incredibly important, but it's going to be in certainly I don't know the exact trajectory, but I would imagine certainly within the next 10 years or fewer, it's going to be spell check, right? Right now, if I were to send an email littered with misspellings, it would be a judgment, right? It would be like, what's, dyslexic or not, dude, you have a tool at your disposal that prevents you from having, this many egregious spelling errors. The same is going to be true for written communication, right? Even think about Grammarly. Think about what a difference that makes in making sure that we're all following and conforming to kind of, standards of punctuation. That the same is going to be true sooner than later in terms of written expression. So how do we help our kids understand how to harness this tool to meet the expectation? Again, not to bypass, not to cheat, not to your point, be lazy. How can we help this tool get the very best out of them? And again, that requires conversation, and it requires a lot of thought to get ChatGPT to work well. There's a lot of thinking that you have to do.
Right. And we just got a question from Lauren. I just want to bring this up because, hi, Lauren. Nice to see you.
Lauren.
I know, right. So Lauren throwing it in, but what about those kids that want to learn to spell and handwrite?
I think that's great. I think in no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that we don't teach kids to spell or and I think handwriting. I'm a huge proponent of AI. I'm still a huge proponent of handwriting because handwriting has got all kind of graphomotor things to it that assist, right, in helping us read and to spell. So it's not about eliminating that at all, but it is about recognizing that at what point, just like at some point we introduce spell check, at some point we introduce calculators, and I would argue at times we should introduce calculators earlier than we do. At some point it becomes a tool that allows us to reach our potential, not a tool that bypasses or that prevents development or any of those things. So I think it's this constant balance, and we have to start thinking of it as a expected tool that kids will have access to.
Right. And I also want to mention that I think it's an important piece, right? Because I used to get extreme writer's block and a lot of anxiety around writing. And we would do exercises in our mentorship program where I'd ask one of our mentees, I'd be like, all right, think of something random, right? And he was like, all right, let's do a zombie apocalypse. And the main character is named Josh, right? And we put it in. And all of a sudden it wrote a whole story. And then we started to ask it questions, right? Because there's also this debate, well, okay, tell me what to write, AI. And now that's ruining the creative process of in creating something from the blue. But what if it can start to get the gears turning? Right?
Oh, yeah.
You have to use it with intention. If I'm given a task to write, what if I can I can start asking questions to my story, right? I mean, it's pretty unbelievable, when we use it properly.
Oh, yeah. I recently had to generate an RFP for an organization I'm involved in to have a research group, submit proposals. I was so out of my league in terms of, I don't even know exactly what the expectations of the format of an RFP for this kind of work is and I knew what I wanted to get. I knew what I wanted to do. So I literally just kind of took my notes and fed them into ChatGPT and said, what can you help me understand what this would look like to conform to the expectation of an RFP for X, Y, and Z? And it did it like that. That had taken me hours. I could have done it, but it would have taken me hours. I also want to take
time, right? Speaking
right.
of time.
I have to real quick, Lauren put on here too, and this is a fascinating phenomenon. That's anecdotal right now, but she mentions that her son and other kids that she knows, they hate AI and assistive tech, and I see that a lot in. It's fascinating right now, right? And I'm still trying to think through it. I think part of it is we have to remember AI is incredibly language intensive. It's incredibly language intensive. It is literally language. So I think that's something we have to think about. And I don't have an answer for that yet, but how do we introduce AI to LD kids so it's empowering and doesn't feel like it's overwhelming? because it's super language intensive on all ends. And assistive tech, I agree too. I think it's a lot of kids are resistant to assistive tech. I think we have to remember too, part of it's because it's still this thing that they struggle with in general, right? It's still, language, right? It's, it's calling upon things that might be difficult for them. And certainly not in this case, but in general, I think we as schools do a terrible job introducing assistive tech. Terrible job. Yeah. We tell kids, here's speech to text, as if, like that, suddenly like an 8-year-old can understand what that means and how to use it properly and all those things.
Well, because they don't know how to use it themselves.
Right.
How are you supposed to teach it if you don't even know how to do it? I mean, there's been many examples of that I've seen also in school. But, I think that brings up to that conversation of there's this weird reputation that AI has with ChatGPT with students, right? And with teens and tweens of saying, oh, I'm not doing that. I hate that, right? But I think it's a reaction.
Right.
It's a reaction. It's like if your whole life you've been made to feel stupid, you need assistive tech because you have a disability, right? Which, for the record, is not the case, right? But like, of course, my relationship with AI or ChatGPT or whatever you want to call it is going to be no.
Right.
But what if it doesn't need to be like that?
Right.
Right.
Right. Yep. 100%.
Do you have an idea on a way that we can communicate it? Like, are you seeing that at Landmark at all? Or like, how can a parent communicate it to their kid that it's actually it's not bad? Like it's.
Yeah, I think, and again, it varies so much on age level, right? What we could do. I think you can get a third grader and you get around a computer and you get it to write silly poems about, different topics and all that. I think that's, but I think for older kids, I think if we can really rethink assessment to say, all right, how can we have a better understanding of what you know and what problems you can solve using AI to allow you to produce all kinds of things, right? A quick example, and I know we're getting towards time, but I interviewed a Harvard professor, Dr. Chris Deedy, and one of the things that he talked about as a hypothetical is he has a daughter who's in college majoring in marketing and communications. And he said there's a world where she graduates in the next 3 to 4 years and she goes to apply for her first marketing job and she's sitting in the interview and they say to her, all right, here's the product. You have 1 hour to create a full product launch with a deck, with a logo, with everything. And we want to see what you can come up with, because the idea is that AI can do so much of that for you that if you can't do more than AI, right, then why would we hire you? But I think we can also integrate that into our classrooms where an essay is one way and it has a place and always should of displaying what you know and you understand. To your point about how can I solve things, there's a anecdotal, really cool class at Harvard where a teacher has developed a murder mystery game for her French class. And it's all using AI, and you go through and your use of French from kind of colloquial to more kind of, standard, but, not as common grammar, et cetera, all impacts how you go through and how you're able to solve this murder mystery game. Well, meanwhile, we're also practicing and assessing your French skills. I think that's the kind of thing where that's amazing. Suddenly, it all makes sense. I understand why I'm learning this and why I'm practicing it versus an isolated skill that, I just can't see how it assists me or what its purpose is.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. I'm going to also put out there for those watching, if you have questions for Josh, this is a really good time to ask. If you do ask questions, you can always reach out to me directly. And I'll be happy to pass that along to Josh as well. Anyway, listen, Josh, let me ask you, in some of our more wrap up questions here, what is your, what are some more like parting thoughts around just where we're headed in schools and how should parents, well, actually, here we go. This is a good question. Here we go. How does Landmark School integrate AI?
Yeah. So slowly, surely, thoughtfully, right? So again, I'm evangelical about it, but it's a conversation that we're having a lot as a school. But what does this mean? What does it look like? Right now, I think we leverage it the most in trying to help teachers think through how can you further personalize instruction? How can you further personalize materials? And then with our older kids, we're having lots of conversations about what could this look like in college, how might you use it, and some of those more ethical questions.
Yeah. And if again, like these are really great questions. And as we start to learn, should you have more questions, just feel free. You can always reach out to us, and we can be happy to share that. But Josh, really, thank you for joining and sharing some of your insight here. I think parents and a lot of our audience has found some really great insight based on what you're saying. It's a very confusing, unknown time that we're navigating, and especially for parents, as you know, you're parenting a dyslexic kid anyway. There's a lot of going in blind, right? You don't really know where that next path is. Now you're going to throw in AI, and it just blew. It just like everything just got flipped upside down. So I feel that, you know, and for everyone watching, please give us a like, give Josh a little shout out, because you know, you're definitely steering the way and making a lot of people feel more comfortable with it. I'm definitely still learning about it. So Josh, do you have any parting thoughts, any like words of wisdom for our parents watching?
Wow, words of wisdom. Yeah, so I think you know, I think big picture when it comes to AI, it's inevitable. It's inevitable, and it's going to be more and more and more integrated into our education, how we live, how we work, all these things. And we don't even have to think that's good or bad, right? It's really, honestly, I think that's now beside the point, because it is what it is. So how can we thoughtfully think about using it as a tool? And I think especially, how can we thoughtfully think about it as a way to empower our kids who often don't have a lot of opportunities in traditional education to feel empowered? How can we leverage this tool to do that? I don't have all the answers for that, but I do think it's questions that we have to ask ourselves. And well, I don't know how to do it. I know we can do it. And I think we just got to start engaging in that.
Josh Clark, thanks for joining on.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye, everybody.